My name is Zsolt Szabo. I am working at the Institute of Agricultural Economics in Hungary, and we decided to make a case study for Hungary that assesses the support scheme for soybean production. The reason why we have chosen, I will discuss it later, and I will also give you some results what we have got, but my main emphasis will not on the results itself, but on the outcomes what we have learned from this. So our case study is focused on a single member state. We dealt with the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 payments in our modeling exercise. The geographical level was national, as I said. And we used the CAPRI agroeconomic model, which is a partial equilibrium agroeconomic model. And this was a trial run. So about the methodology. As I said, we studied the protein crop sector in Hungary, and CAPRI was especially well. It was a good tool to use for this type of studies because it has very granular, high-density input data. It uses a harmonized database from Faustat and Eurostat, among others, but we can also implement national member state level databases as well. It uses the GAMS programming language, which is kind of barrier for using this kind of tool, but it has a nice Java-based graphical user interface. So at the basic level, everyone can use this tool. And as I said, we made some adaptation during our work. Why we have chosen the study of protein crop support? As you know, the European Union is heavily relied on imported crude protein feeds, especially for the poultry and pig sectors, where you see that the high protein feeds like soybean and oilseed, more than 2/3 of the high protein feed is imported for the poultry and pig sectors. And especially for the soybean, it's crucial to acknowledge that almost all soybean is imported. So we posed the question whether increasing the acreage of locally produced protein crop is a valid policy question, and we thought that it is indeed the case. When we want to make such studies, or we want to introduce a new concept of introducing a new support scheme into the existing Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 payment schemes, we have to think at 3 different levels. First of all, we have to think about what farmers consider important. In the farmer's perspective, protein crops are not so profitable compared to wheat, for example. They have also problems in Europe that the average soybean yield is lower than abroad, and they also have to somehow integrate this into their crop rotation pattern. From the governmental perspective, they have different problems. They have to dampen the global price fluctuations and supply chain vulnerabilities. And they also consider soybean trade as an important driver of global land use change. So considering these aspects, they use different types of coupled income support for protein crops to shape this balance among the different possibilities. And third, the third player that comes to this exercise is the technical support team, like the Agricultural Economic Institute in Hungary, that can provide knowledge or at least a framework to address these questions. And we have to keep in mind that giving such support to the farmers will both affect the supply and the demand side of the economy. And for that, we need a sophisticated model like the CAPRI, Common Agricultural Policy Impact Model, that I will explain a little bit on the next slide. So I give you just one example of all results, because we had several others, but in this short time of presentation, I think I want to focus on one aspect that is quite nice in the CAPRI, and that will I explain later on. But first, I just give you a summary of what we have studied in this example. The scenario A was based on a promise of the Commission in probably some of you know this Commission proposal 565 that will allow a 5% increase in payment to farmers if they will use it for protein crops, among others. So we implemented this into the scenario A, and in scenario B, we used unspecific increase in eco schemes for protein grains, and for other crops, we decreased the corresponding part. So even though these two scenarios look a bit similar, a 5% increase on one side and a general increase in the eco scheme, but we had quite different results. And that is shown in this table, where you see, first of all, the soybean acreage that is forecasted by the CAPRI model. In the first line, we see in the scenario A, for the farmer's perspective, the total cost will increase to about 160%, and the income will go up to 380% for the 5% increase for the protein crops. Whereas if we increase the payments through the eco scheme program to the farmers, both the total cost and the income will go up, but not at that high level than in scenario A. But what is interesting using CAPRI or equilibrium models like CAPRI is that if we look at also to downstream sectors, because soybean is used by the pig and poultry industry mostly, then we see a difference. In scenario A, we see almost no difference, no increase in total cost or income, whereas in pig breeding, we will see an appreciable level of increase in income also in the pig breeding sector. So two types of support, which looks more or less the same from at the beginning, have a quite different outcome in the downstream sectors. And this could be important for the policy point of view, because if you just focus on one sector, you may miss the target. But if you give a support for a certain sector, and if it will have a downstream effect, then it might have a much broader effect in the farming system on the whole. And on this slide, I would like to give you a short introduction of what is feasible with the CAPRI model. I made this slide from our experience, because we investigated several other prospective scenarios, and I have to tell you that for that to have a more complicated demanding scenario to set up, you need to have a collaboration with one of the core team of the CAPRI model. And this is because of this, this lists all of the core tasks that has to be implemented at your institute, at your ministry, and so on. But on your own, you have to go through the calibration, but without the help of the core team, you will fail on almost all steps. You can do your calibration or run the scenario only at the two latest steps. And I also give you some examples of what I mean on the different steps. For example, if you want to change the composition of milk feed bags, so what you feed with the different types of animals, you have to ask for the core team. The same applies when you would like to increase the crude protein content of different crop proteins like soybean. And the same is true for if you want to change the nitrogen accounting in animal husbandry, because if you feed with higher crude protein content feed, then you will have a different excretion of nitrogen. And the same is true for if you want to trade synthetic amino acids for crude protein content in the model. So for all of these questions, you need a sophisticated approach, and for that, you definitely need to hook up with one of the core team. What you can do on your own is what I presented it on the previous slide. If you want to change a support scheme, an existing support scheme in the CAPRI, then it's feasible. But we have to make this distinction that complicated scenarios need definitely a collaboration with the core team. And now I turn to the slides where what we have learned from these studies. First of all, we validated mandatory. I didn't show the results because of time constraint, but we generated several tables on land use, different markets, incomes, emissions, etc. So you can communicate these to your ministries, for example, if you need. But for that to happen, you need to have a capacity building with external experts to get meaningful results for sophisticated studies. And I also stressed already, but I mentioned it here also that because the model uses the GAMS language, you need a certain level of expertise in this as well. And the national authorities or ministries who contemplate to implement these methods need to assess if they need separate funding for these, and time commitment is also a constraint for implementing these methods. And going over what we have learned from these case studies is since CAPRI is a partial economic model, it cannot represent all the aspects of the agriculture, but it is quite heavily focused on agriculture, but on the food sector, which is associated, the downstream sector of in the economic framework is not so well represented. So to say that there is a trade-off that you can gain a deep understanding in the agricultural part, but less in the food sector. And once you need, you think you decide to set up such a model in your environment, then you need skilled expertise for that. The major barrier from our experience, I think, is that the policy units at the Agriculture Ministry are operating on rather political negotiation and less on hardcore modeling results. So it's hard to sell these type of results. second, the problem is that CAPRI relies on optimization and less on behavioral decision making. So it's also an aspect that is rather mathematical outcome, and they are just less interested in taking up these results. And we also need to acknowledge that you have to establish a channel with your paying agency or ministry to have this kind of cooperation work. But what could be done to increase this uptake from the part of the ministry or from other stakeholders? One solution, what worked in our case, is to choose a topic, not a big picture, but choose a side topic, so to say, that relies on just on one aspect, like the ecological outcome of such measures. Because, for example, there are lots of EU requirements that are in place and that requires member states to increase the environmental consciousness in the CAP strategy planning. And this kind of increased awareness is hard to translate to policies. And here comes modeling tools like GloBiome or CAPRI that can provide an ecological environmental answer to these questions. They can quantify greenhouse gas emissions in different support schemes, so they can provide answers to these very highly specific questions. And again, we need to reframe the policy questions to easy to communicate comparative scenarios. That could be also another option to facilitate this kind of cooperation between the stakeholders. And last but not least, I just put this slide just to illustrate what would be the ideal steps along those lines. We are behind this, but first of all, we need a user need assessment. We have to discuss with the ministries what is feasible, what they think important is. We should have an on-site training in the ministry so that they can better appreciate our results and they could incorporate into their discussions, which would lead to a joint work phase. And after the scenarios have run, we could have an joint impact assessment that what we have learned from these. And then we could have the exploitation phase at the end. That means that we could make targeted recommendations in the CAP planning phase, and that would be incorporated into the national CAP strategic planning. But as I said, this is far from the real picture, but that would be the ultimate aim of such a study is what we have done in Hungary. So thank you for your attention.